My husband served me divorce papers at my father's funeral, thinking he'd secure half the estate before running off with his 23-year-old intern. He didn't realize that by legally making me single at 10 a.m., he triggered a secret clause read at 2 p.m. that gave me the entire $10 million, and left him with absolutely nothing. It was raining. Of course it was raining. The cliché. A bad movie trope. But the cold drizzle felt appropriate as I stood by the open grave, my heels sinking into the mud. My father, Arthur Vance, was being lowered into the ground. To the rest of the world, Arthur was a titan of industry. A man who turned a single hardware store into a logistics empire. To me he was just Dad. The man who taught me how to fish, how to balance a ledger, and how to spot a liar from a mile away. I missed the last lesson. Curry. I looked to my left. Mark stood there. My husband of 6 years. He was wearing a black suit that cost $3,000. I knew the price because I paid the credit card bill last month. He looked solemn. Said even. He was a good actor. He reached out and squeezed my hand. "It's almost over, Sarah," he whispered. "We can move on soon." I thought he meant moving on from the grief. From the cancer that had eaten my father alive for 18 months. I squeezed his hand back, grateful for the support. I was an idiot. The priest finished the benediction. People started to disperse, heading toward the black town cars lining the cemetery road. I took a step forward to place a single white rose on the casket. That's when it happened. A man in a cheap trench coat stepped out from behind a tombstone 3 rows back. He didn't look like a mourner. He looked like a process server. Because he was. He walked right up to me. At my father's grave. The dirt wasn't even filled in yet. "Sarah Miller?" he asked. His voice was too loud for a cemetery. I blinked, confused. "Yes." He shoved a thick manila envelope into my chest. "You've been served." I froze. I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Mark. Mark wasn't looking at me. He was checking his watch. An Apple Watch. The screen lit up, showing a text message. I caught the name before the screen went dark. "Mark," I asked, my voice trembling. "What is this?" He finally turned to me. The sadness was gone. Replaced by a cold, bored indifference. "It's over, Sarah," he said. He didn't even lower his voice. "I filed this morning. Irreconcilable differences. I want a clean break." "Now," I whispered. "You're doing this now?" "Best time to rip the Band-Aid off," he said. He actually shrugged. "Look, don't make a scene. The lawyers will handle the asset split. Since we're in a community property state, I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. Plus, once the inheritance clears, we can negotiate a settlement on the appreciation." He had done the math. He had actually done the math. "You're leaving me," I said. "For her." He didn't ask who her was. He just smirked. "Jessica respects me, Sarah. She doesn't treat me like an employee. And frankly, he's fun." "You haven't been fun in years." "I haven't been fun because I spent the last 2 years changing my father's bedpans and running his company while you played golf," I thought. But I couldn't speak. The air had left my lungs. Mark adjusted his tie. "I'm not coming to the wake. Or the reading. My lawyer advised against it. I'll be at the condo. Condo. Our vacation property. The one my father bought us as a wedding gift." "You're staying at the condo," I repeated. "I changed the locks this morning," he said casually. "Don't come by. I'll have someone send your things." He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He walked straight to a waiting Uber at the cemetery gates. As he opened the door, I saw a flash of blonde hair in the back seat. She had been waiting in the car. At the funeral. I stood there, clutching the envelope, the rain plastering my hair to my face. The audacity. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it. He wanted to make sure the divorce date was filed before the inheritance hit my accounts, thinking it gave him leverage. Or maybe he just wanted to twist the knife. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I flinched, expecting another process server. It was Mr. Henderson. My father's lawyer for 40 years. A man who wore 3-piece suits in July and had eyes like a hawk. "Sarah," he said softly. "Are you all right?" I looked at him. I must have looked like a ghost. "He left me Arthur. Mark. He served me divorce papers. Right here." I held up the envelope. The paper was getting wet. Mr. Henderson looked at the envelope. Then he looked at the retreating Uber. Then he looked at his watch. What time was it filed? Mr. Henderson asked. What? The timestamp, Sarah. On the papers. I fumbled with the clasp. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I pulled out the top sheet. Stamped in blue ink. Filed. Superior Court 9:58 m. 10 o'clock, I said. Just before the service started. Mr. Henderson stared at the timestamp. For a second I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. A spark. Maybe surprise. But it was something else. Satisfaction. Interesting, Mr. Henderson said. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to me. Dry your eyes, Sarah. We have the reading of the will at 2 o'clock. I can't, I choked out. I can't deal with the estate right now. Mark he destroyed everything. Sarah, Mr. Henderson said. His voice dropped an octave. It sounded like my father's voice. You need to be at that reading. Trust me. You really need to be at that reading. There was a weight to his words. A gravity that cut through my panic. Okay, I whispered. Good, he said. And Sarah? Do not tell Mark to come back. Do not contest the filing date. Let it stand. Why? Because, Mr. Henderson said, looking at the grave of his oldest friend, your father was a very thorough man. I watched him walk away toward his vintage Rolls-Royce. I was alone in the rain. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. I looked at the papers again. Asterisk petitioner, Mark Miller. Respondent, Sarah Vance Miller. Asterisk. He wanted a war. I remembered the last thing my father said to me 2 days before he slipped into the coma. He had grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. Asterisk, watch the quiet ones, Sarah. And watch the greedy ones. But mostly watch the ones who think they're smarter than they are. Mark thought he was a genius. He thought he had timed this perfectly. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and just breathed. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app. I knew it was going to be bad, but I needed to know how bad. Zero balance in the joint checking. Zero balance in the savings. Pending transaction. $42,500 transfer to external account. He had drained us. Every liquid cent we had. He left me with $6.42. I scrolled down. The credit cards. Amex Platinum. $18,400 balance. Visa signature. $12,200 balance. Charges from the last week. Asterisk Cartier. $4,000. Asterisk. Asterisk the Ritz-Carlton. $2,000. Asterisk. Asterisk Delta Airlines. First class. 2 tickets to Cabo. Asterisk. He wasn't just leaving. He was going on a honeymoon with her. On my dime. I felt the tears coming then. Hot, angry tears. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel. Once. Twice. You bastard, I screamed. You absolute bastard. But screaming didn't put money back in the account. Screaming didn't undo the last 6 years. I looked at the clock. 11:15 a.m. I had less than 3 hours until the will reading. I had to go home, change out of these wet clothes, and face a room full of people who wanted a piece of my father. I put the car in gear. Driving home was a blur. Every street corner held a memory. There was the Italian restaurant where Mark proposed. He'd hidden the ring in a tiramisu. I remembered thinking it was romantic. Now I wondered if he'd put it on a credit card he expected my dad to pay off. There was the dealership where we bought his Porsche. I need it for client meetings, Sarah, he'd said. Image is everything in sales. He sold insurance. He didn't need a Porsche. But I bought it for him. Because I loved him. Because I wanted him to feel equal to my family. That was always the issue. The gap. My father, Arthur, was self-made, but he was old money by the time I was born. Private schools. Summers in the Hamptons. Mark grew up differently. And that was fine. I liked that about him. He had hustle. Or so I thought. When we met, he was charming. He listened. He seemed so interested in my dreams, my art, my life. He didn't care about the Vance Logistics empire. I love you for you, Sarah, he'd said on our first anniversary. Not the name. God, I was gullible. I pulled into the driveway of our house. Well, technically it was my house. Dad bought it for me before the marriage. Thank God for small miracles. But inside, it felt empty. I walked into the kitchen. There was a coffee cup on the counter. Mark's. It still had lipstick on the rim. Bright pink. Not my shade. She had been here. In my house. Probably this morning while I was at the funeral home preparing the body. I felt sick. Physically sick. I grabbed the cup and threw it into the sink. Chattered. The sound was satisfying. I went upstairs to the bedroom. The closet was open. His side was stripped bare. The suits were gone. The shoes. The watch winder. He had planned this for weeks. Maybe months. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wedding photo on the nightstand. We looked so happy. I looked at my father in the background of the photo. He wasn't smiling. He was looking at Mark with a flat, unreadable expression. Dad knew. I closed my eyes, remembering a fight from 3 years ago. He's spending money we don't have, Sarah, Dad had said. We were in his study. The air smelled of cigar smoke and old leather. It's an investment, Dad, I argued. He's starting a consulting firm. It's a black hole, Dad snapped. I looked into his firm. It's a shell. He's gambling, Sarah. Crypto. Sports. I don't know what, but the money is going out and not coming in. You just don't like him because he's not from your world, I yelled. I don't like him because he's a shark, Dad said quietly. And you're the bait. I stopped talking to Dad for a month after that. I defended Mark. I covered his debts. I hid the bank statements so Dad wouldn't see. I enabled the monster who just destroyed me. I stood up. Enough. I stripped off the wet funeral clothes. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was red, trying to wash off the feeling of betrayal. I dressed in a dry suit. Navy blue. Armor. I did my makeup. I hid the dark circles. I put on the diamond earrings my mother left me. I checked the time. 1:15 p.m. I needed to get to Mr. Henderson's office. As I grabbed my keys, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Don't try to access the offshore accounts. My lawyer froze them pending the division of assets. Play nice, Sarah, and I might let you keep the house. He was delusional. The offshore accounts were in a trust. He couldn't freeze them. But the attempt showed his hand. He was going for everything. Scorched earth. I didn't reply. I just got in the car. Mr. Henderson's office was downtown, in a glass skyscraper that overlooked the city. The Vance Logistics building was visible from the window. I walked into the conference room at 1:55 p.m. The room was full. My Aunt Linda was there, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. She hadn't visited Dad in 5 years, but she was front and center for the payout. My cousin Greg sat next to her looking hungover. And sitting in the corner looking uncomfortable was Mrs. Higgins, my dad's housekeeper for 20 years. She looked terrified. I went straight to Mrs. Higgins and took her hand. It's good to see you, Martha. She patted my hand. Oh, honey. I'm so sorry about your father. And everything else. News traveled fast. Mr. Henderson walked in at exactly 2 p.m. He carried a leather binder. He sat at the head of the table and placed the binder down. He looked at everyone over his spectacles. Thank you all for coming, he said. His voice was dry, professional. We are here to read the last will and testament of Arthur James Vance. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I will begin with the minor bequests, Henderson said. He read through the list. $5,000 to the gardener. $10,000 to the local library. His collection of vintage fly fishing rods to cousin Greg. Greg looked visibly disappointed. He wanted cash. $50,000 to Mrs. Higgins. Martha gasped. She started crying quietly. Oh, Mr. Vance. He didn't have to do that. He wanted to, Martha, I said softly. Henderson continued. Aunt Linda got a painting. A meaningless landscape she had once admired to be polite. She pursed her lips but said nothing. Finally, Henderson cleared his throat. He looked at me. Now, regarding the bulk of the estate, he said. The primary assets, including the controlling shares of Vance Logistics, the real estate portfolio, and the liquid cash reserves, totaling approximately $10 million. The air left the room. Aunt Linda leaned forward. Mr. Vance was very specific about the distribution of these assets, Henderson said. He updated his will 7 days before his passing. I frowned. 7 days ago? Dad was barely lucid then. He dictated the following clause, Henderson said. He began to read. Asterisk to my beloved daughter Sarah Vance Miller, I leave the entirety of my estate. Sis. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. However, Henderson continued. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Asterisk, I have observed with great sorrow the nature of her marriage to Mark Miller. It is my firm belief that this man does not have her best interests at heart. Therefore I have attached a conditional precedent to this inheritance. Sis. My heart hammered against my ribs. A condition. A poison pill. Henderson looked directly at me. Asterisk. If, at the time of the reading of this will, Sarah is still legally married to and cohabitating with Mark Miller, the sum of $10 million shall be placed into a charitable trust for the preservation of wetlands. Sarah will receive a monthly stipend of $2,000, controlled by an independent executor, to ensure Mark Miller never touches the principal. Sis. The room was silent. My stomach dropped. $2,000 a month? That wouldn't even cover the property tax on the house. Dad had tried to protect me, but he had handcuffed me. If I was married to Mark, I was broke. And I was married to Mark. Technically. Aunt Linda smirked. Well, that's a shame. For the wetlands, I mean. Good cause. Henderson held up a hand. I am not finished. He turned the page. However, he read asterisk, if Sarah is no longer married to Mark Miller, or if she is the respondent in a divorce filing initiated by Mark Miller prior to the reading of this will, the condition is null and void. Sis. I froze. My brain tried to process the words. Or if she is the respondent in a divorce filing initiated by Mark Miller. Henderson looked at me. A small, barely perceptible smile played on his lips. In such a case, he read asterisk, Sarah Vance shall inherit the estate in full, free of any trust or restriction. Furthermore, as the filing of divorce papers constitutes a legal separation of assets under state law, this inheritance shall be classified strictly as separate property, not subject to marital division. Sis. I sat there, stunned. Dad knew. He knew Mark. He knew exactly what Mark would do. He knew that the moment Mark thought the money was coming, he would try to cut me loose to secure his half without having to stay in the marriage. Or he knew Mark would try to secure his debt-free life immediately. Dad had baited a trap with $10 million. And Mark, the greedy, arrogant rat, had snapped it shut on his own neck. Sarah, Henderson said, breaking my trance. Can you confirm your current marital status? I reached into my bag. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I pulled out the damp, crumpled envelope. I was served this morning, I said. My voice was steady. Strong. At the funeral. Tenant. I slid the papers across the mahogany table. Henderson picked them up. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the timestamp. Filed 9:58 a.m., Henderson announced to the room. Petitioner, Mark Miller. Well, that settles it. He closed the binder. The condition is met. The wetlands get nothing. Sarah, you get everything. Aunt Linda looked furious. But surely that's not legal? A clause like that. It is perfectly legal, Henderson said smoothly. It's a conditional bequest. And Mr. Miller, in his haste to abandon his wife, fulfilled the condition perfectly. I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle. Then it bubbled up raw and hysterical. Mark thought he was destroying me. He thought he was leaving me broken and penniless while he ran off with his intern. Instead, he had just handed me $10 million. And because he filed before I inherited, he had legally established that the inheritance was acquired after the date of separation. He had cut himself out of the will. Completely. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I need to make a phone call. I walked out of the conference room and into the hallway. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to peek through the clouds. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Mark. Not yet. First I called the bank. My dad's bank. The one where the main accounts were held. This is Sarah Vance, I said. I'm with Mr. Henderson. We need to execute the transfer of control immediately. Of course, Ms. Vance. We were expecting the call. Next I called the locksmith. A different one. Hi, this is Sarah. I need the locks changed at my condo on the beach. Yes, the one on Ocean Drive. No, immediately. I have the deed. I'll meet you there in an hour. Then I called Mark. He answered on the second ring. I could hear music in the background. The beat. reggae tone. He was celebrating. Sarah, he said. He sounded annoyed. I told you talk to my lawyer. I'm busy. I know, I said. I just wanted to thank you. Thank me. He laughed. For what? Leaving you. For filing, I said. For doing it today. This morning. Before the reading. Yeah, well. I needed a clean break. What's your point? The point, Mark, I said, enjoying every syllable, is that Dad added a clause to the will last week. The music in the background seemed to get quieter. Or maybe he turned it down. What clause? The one that said I only get the money if we're divorced. Or if you served me papers. Silence. Dead silence. What? He whispered. If we were still married, I continued, the money would have gone to charity. All 10 million of it. But since you filed at 9:58 a.m., and the reading was at 2 p.m., I get it all. And since we're legally separated as of this morning, it's all mine. Separate property. You don't get a dime. You're lying, he snapped. But I could hear the panic in his voice. The squeak of fear. Ask Henderson, I said. Or better yet, ask your lawyer. I'm sure he'll explain what date of separation means regarding subsequent inheritance. Sarah, wait, he stammered. Baby, wait. I can withdraw the petition. It was a mistake. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking straight. You were thinking perfectly straight, I said. You were thinking about Jessica. Speaking of, I hope she has a place to stay. Because I'm on my way to the condo with the police to remove 2 trespassers. You can't do that. That's my condo. My father bought it, I said. It's in the trust. The trust one now control. You have an hour to get your things and get out. Sarah, please. The debts. The cards. I can't pay them without. Not my problem, I said. You wanted a clean break, Mark? You got it. I hung up. I stood there for a moment, the phone warm in my hand. Felt light. For the first time in 2 years, the crushing weight on my chest was gone. I walked back into the conference room. Henderson was packing up his papers. He looked up at me and winked. A slow, deliberate wink. Did you make your call? He asked. I did. And? He's panicking, I said. Good, Henderson said. I took the liberty of contacting the credit card companies while you were out. I informed them of the filing and that you are not liable for any charges made by Mr. Miller as of 9:58 a.m. today. They are flagging his cards as we speak. I looked at this old man, this shark in a 3-piece suit. You planned this. You and Dad. Your father was a brilliant strategist, Sarah, Henderson said. He knew he couldn't convince you to leave Mark. You were too loyal. So he created a scenario where Mark would remove himself. He gambled everything on Mark being a scumbag, I said. It wasn't a gamble, Henderson replied. It was a sure thing. The next few hours were a whirlwind. A beautiful, chaotic whirlwind. I drove to the condo. The locksmith was already there. So was a police cruiser. I had called the non-emergency line and reported unauthorized occupants in a property owned by the Vance Trust. When I pulled up, Mark was standing on the curb. His suitcases were piled next to him. Jessica was sitting on one of them, crying. She looked at me with venom in her eyes. You're a witch, she screamed. You can't just kick us out. I stepped out of my car. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just walked up to them, my heels clicking on the pavement. Actually, I said. This is private property. And since Mark filed for divorce this morning, he has no marital right to a vacation home held in a separate trust. Mark looked broken. He was pale, sweating. He tried to approach me. Sarah, please. Let's talk. We can fix this. I love you. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. The cheap desperation in his eyes. You don't love me, Mark, I said calmly. You loved the lifestyle. And now it's gone. I have nothing, he whispered. The debts, the gambling, they'll kill me, Sarah. You should have thought of that before you served me papers at my father's grave, I said. I turned to the officer. Officer, I'd like these people removed from the premises. The officer nodded. You heard the lady. Move along. Mark tried to grab my arm. Sarah. The officer stepped in between us. Sir, step back. Now. Mark recoiled. He looked at me one last time. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw his mistake. His $10 million mistake. He grabbed his suitcase. Come on, Jess. Where are we going? She wailed. You said we were going to Cabo. We're going to my mom's, he muttered. I watched them load their bags into his Porsche. A Porsche I would be repossessing next week since the lease was in the company name. They drove off. I walked into the condo. It smelled like her perfume. Cheap vanilla. I walked to the balcony and opened the doors. The ocean breeze rushed in, scrubbing the air clean. I took a deep breath. It wasn't going to be easy. I had a company to run. I had a divorce to finalize. I had to heal from the loss of my father. But as I watched the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, I realized something. I wasn't afraid. I had my father's grit. I had his company. And thanks to Mark's greed, I had my freedom. My phone buzzed again. A text from Henderson. Asterisk, the transfer is complete. The funds are in your sole control. Also, I found a bottle of 1982 Macallan in your father's desk. It has a note on it. Asterisk. I smiled. I knew exactly what the note would say. For the victory lap. I went to the kitchen, found a glass and poured myself a drink. Not the Macallan. I'd saved that for when the divorce decree was signed. Just water. Cold, clear water. I raised the glass to the horizon. Here's to you, Dad, I whispered. And here's to the fine print. I took a sip. Then I blocked Mark's number. I had a logistics empire to run. 6 months later. The divorce was final yesterday. It was ugly. Mark tried everything. He claimed he was under duress. He claimed he didn't understand the papers he signed. He even tried to claim I tricked him into filing. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, wasn't having it. Mr. Miller, she had said in court, looking over her glasses. You are a grown man who hired a process server to ambush your wife at a funeral. You do not get to claim duress, because your plan backfired. She granted me everything. The house. The company. The accounts. Mark got his clothes. And his debt. I heard through the grapevine, cousin Greg, that Jessica left him about 3 weeks after the funeral. Apparently, living in his mother's basement wasn't the luxury lifestyle she signed up for. Mark was working at a car rental agency near the airport. He tried to email me once asking for a loan. I forwarded it to Henderson. He sent back a cease and desist. I was sitting in my father's office. My office now. I had redecorated. The heavy leather was gone, replaced by cream linen and modern art. But I kept his old mahogany desk. Mrs. Higgins knocked on the door. Sarah? There's a gentleman to see you. Who is it? A Mr. Davis. From the Wetlands Charity. I smiled. Send him in. A young man walked in looking nervous. Ms. Vance? I was told to come see you. About the trust. Yes, I said. I stood up and shook his hand. We were disappointed when the condition in the will wasn't met, he admitted. $10 million would have saved the entire estuary. I know, I said. My father cared about those wetlands. I picked up a folder from my desk. That's why I'm starting a new foundation, I said. The Arthur Vance Memorial Trust. I handed him a check. He looked at it. His eyes went wide. $1 million, he choked out. To start, I said. And I'd like to sit on the board. If you'll have me. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. He was practically vibrating with joy. My father taught me a lot of things, I said, looking at the portrait of Dad on the wall. He taught me how to protect what's yours. But he also taught me that once you're safe, you should do some good. The young man left, clutching the check like a lifeline. I walked to the window. The city bustled below me. I was 32 years old. I was single. I was wealthy. And for the first time in my life I was wide awake. Mark had tried to bury me. But he forgot that I was a seed. I went back to my desk. I had work to do. And somewhere in a rental car kiosk near the airport my ex-husband was handing keys to a tourist, wondering where it all went wrong. I knew the answer. He bet against the house. And the house always wins.